Hello again and welcome to Communication in Health. My name is Krista Buckland and this lecture is on what affects the message when communicating. So this is a really important aspect of communication, and it's important to become aware, in particular self-aware of your own barriers to communication and what's affecting your message, but also to be able to understand from the perspective of others and what message they may be trying to communicate, but it may be getting muddled. We mentioned just in the other topic about noise. Now, noise distorts the message between the sender and receiver and acts as a barrier. So remember I said that the message you think you're relating to another person may not necessarily be the message that they receive. And this is due to noise and these barriers. So some of these barriers include physical barriers, perceptual barriers, emotional barriers, cultural barriers, language barriers, gender barriers, and interpersonal barriers. Now, many of these are self-explanatory, but let's go through them one by one. Physical barriers may include something as simple as a table, or there may be something blocking someone's way visually that is distorting the message that they're receiving. Emotional barriers may include how that person, the receiver, for example, is feeling, and so that may be distorting how they're understanding the message. It could also come from the sender, who may be emotional or feeling some particular emotions that in that moment, and that is distorting how they're expressing their message. Cultural and language barriers are also a very common barrier that you may already be quite aware of. Body language may differ from culture to culture. So a body language may be interpreted differently in one culture than another. Consider all the various forms of greetings that people engage in around the world. Not everyone shakes hands to greet. Some people bow. Eye contact differs from culture to culture. So in one culture, eye contact may be seen as a sign of respect, and in another culture, it may be seen as a sign of disrespect. So these things can alter the message that the receiver receives. Language barriers are also very common. Consider that a person speaking in a language other than their native tongue may have difficulty expressing themselves. They may have limited vocabulary, specifically in a health context. They may not know quite the right words to explain what they would like to. And there may also be an accent that is making it difficult for you to understand them. Also consider whether any of these barriers may be on your end. So it's not just about the client being a different culture to you, but you being a different culture to the client. So consider how you might be able to more clearly speak and consider those differences that you may have with the client. Becoming aware of your own cultural or language barriers applies to everyone. Just one example from my own experience is that I'm aware that I have a tendency to stop mid-sentence, and in fact sometimes I'm stopping mid-word. So I'll half say a word and then all of a sudden decide to say a different word and change what I want to say, and that could be very confusing if I did that with a client or patient, particularly if they're from another culture or their language, their first language is not English. So becoming aware of your little habits and language idiosyncrasies is important so that you can adjust them to suit your audience. Also, another exercise I'd like you to think about is remember back to when you were in high school and learning another language. Most of us have attempted to some degree another language. Perhaps it was just for a few months learning the basics of another language. Imagine being in that country and trying to express yourself in a language that was not your first language. So as you can imagine, that would be quite difficult. Gender barriers refers to, obviously, the different ways that men and women communicate. And interpersonal barriers could just be things to do with personality and differences in personality. So becoming aware of these barriers is the first step to overcoming them. How important is tone when we are speaking to each other? Here is an excellent example. We can have the same sentence and just an adjustment of tone can change the meaning. I want a drink of water. I want a drink of water. I want a drink of water. So these all convey slightly different messages. So noise and barriers to communication mean that the message the sender is sending does not always arrive as it should. Here's an example on the left of this in a health context. So here a patient is saying it hurts, and the practitioner is interpreting the way they're saying it that that they mustn't be in much pain because they don't seem to be making a whole lot of fuss about it. Whereas in fact, the person is in a substantial amount of pain, but they are trying their best to stay calm and deal with that pain so that they can communicate with the practitioner. So it's very easy for misunderstandings to occur. And that concludes this lecture.